All right, good morning, everyone. Lamed Zion Ahmed Bays. Uh, we are four lines down, right at the two dots. Va'al mashke be matbechaya dochon. We were going through the three things that Yosef's based in permitted that caused him to receive the title of Yosef the Permitter, which scared off from Yehuda Nasiya from adding on more things that he was going to permit, particularly the bread of non-Jews. And one of the last thing that the second to last thing that he, I guess that means the second to first thing also. Anyway, the second thing that he permitted was the liquids that were in the slaughtering area. So my dochan, Gemara's first question is, what does he mean when he says dochan? Dochan means pure. When he used the word dochan before, the first case that we had was talking about the grasshopper, and there we decided that the word dochan meant that it was kosher. So what does the word dochan in this context mean? So he says, oh no, we did this. We did this part, right? We did this one. I'll read it through
We
anyway.
did. Yeah, we're actually down to the two dots
So
of
that's
Al Dikarev.
okay. That's where
Dikra
Al
Lemisa.
Diakriv. That's where we are with that. We're
Yeah.
at that one, which is more like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 lines down. Sorry about that, everyone. So 17 lines down.
No,
We
that,
are at
that that's a
that.
good chazara. That's a
That's
good
right.
chazara.
We did that with Chazar. That one we decided those were the liquids. We had the machlokes between Rav and Shmuel whether they were able to, whether they were tummy themselves or they can make something else tummy. That's what that was discussing, and that's what we how we discussed it over there. Now, the Al Diyakriv Lemisa Mas Evikorle Yosef Shari. The last one was, that's what I thought we were up to the last one. The last one was that somebody who touches a dead body is tummy. So we had a couple of questions on that. First of all, the Torah says that if somebody touches a dead body, you're tameh. Second of all, that doesn't sound like a leniency. That sounds like something that you're not allowed to do, and you're not allowed to do something that's called stringency. So Yosef Asr mi boile. So that's where we're going to start. Though we're going to start with Yosef is saying something that makes it should be Yosef is making something Asr. Hang on, Yehuda. The ode, and furthermore, deoraisehi, it's a Torah prohibition because the Torah says you can't touch a dead body. Dichsev, as the pasuk says, "V'chosher yiga al pnei sadeh." Anybody who touches on in the field, so bechlal cherev or b'meis, whether they touch the corpse with a weapon in it, right, or the body itself, so it transmits corpse tuma to the person who touches that. So the answer is deoraisa diyakarev tameh Diakriv b'diakriv tohor. He says from a Torah perspective, the Gemara says from a Torah perspective, the person who touches the dead body is tameh, but the person who touches someone who touches a dead body, that person's still tohor. Meaning, we have this concept of an avi avos tuma, the grandfather of tuma. That's the body we call it avi avos tuma, and then we have the concept that a person who touches a body himself becomes an avatuma. That's a top level tuma. Then we say that somebody who touches that person becomes a Rishon Latuma. Says the Gemara, that idea of a Rishon Latuma, that's only Durabanan. That doesn't really exist, Mita Oraisa. Only a person who touches something that's the body that's Tameh is actually Tameh, but the person who touches, that's the rabbinic enactment. Okay? So, Yehuda, yes.
So when you go to a funeral, after you touch the coffin or whatever, how does wash a negavasar to go away the tuma?
I don't think that it does. I think that the washing is to there's a ruach hatuma that is separate. I'm going to be honest with you with when it comes to the halachos of funerals and washing in all of those situations. I am a very poor person to ask. I have been to almost no funerals in person. Baruch Hashem. I usually wind up arriving and coming to the Shiva houses afterwards, but I do not usually attend most funerals as a Kohen. So therefore, I'm not sure of all the rules of hand washing and such. But I know that hand washing would not remove that. A tumas mace, hand washing would not help you. That is correct. The hand washing is for something else. I'm sure that there's a ruach hatuma, which is some other type of a thing. Doesn't have to do with removing that type of tuma. So now the Asu Inu comes along this based in Vigozer Afilu Diakriv B'Diakriv, and they said, you know what? Not only is a person who touches the body Tameh, but the person who touches the person who touches, that person becomes Tameh as well. V'asa Ihu, and that so then they could that's what not that basin, but a different basin came along and said that. V'asa Ihu then comes back the basin of Yosef, the Okmea Doraisa, and they said, no, let's go back to the way things were Midoraisa. We're going to remove that enactment that added a level of Tuma, rabbinically, and we're going to go back to the way it was, and Diakriv, B'Diakriv, so and we're voting B'Doraisa, we're going to leave it back the way it was from the Torah perspective. Meaning that when it says that Yosef's Basin said that a person who touches a corpse is Tameh, what they meant to say was that before that, there was a rabbinic enactment that somebody who touches someone who touches is Tameh. And they said, no, only the person who touches is Tameh. And that's a leniency because they have now made it so that the person who touches is not Tameh. Okay, so that's good. So now the problem the Gemara has is that Diakriv B'Diakriv Nami De'oraisahu. This idea that we said the Rishon Latuma is only rabbinic is not true, right? That's also from a Torah perspective. Dichsiv, as the pasuk says, V'chol asher yiga bo hatamei yitma. Whoever touches the person who's tamei is also tamei. That's what the pasuk says, which means that the Rishon, the concept of a Rishon Latuma, is also deoraisa. So that can't be the explanation. You can't say that they made a rabbinic enactment that they then repealed when that's actually a Torah thing. So Amrua Rabbanan Kamei de Rava Mishmei de Marzutra. So they said the statement of the Rabbanan said this in front of Rava in the name of Marzutra, Bray de Rav Nachman, the son of Rav Nachman, to Amr Mishmei de Rav Nachman, who said it in the name of Rav Nachman himself. De Oraisa, the original rule from the Torah was Diakriv B'Diakriv Bechiburin Tumas Shiva. So he says that if somebody touches that which is touching while it's still touching the mace, so they contract tuma on a set for 7 days, meaning a person's touching the mace, and then somebody comes along and touches the person while he's still touching, then that tuma is going to transfer through that person for 7 days. Shelo bechiburin. Now, if the person is not touching, he already touched, became a avatuma, and tumas erev. So now somebody touches him is tameh for what we call tumas erev only until nightfall. He doesn't have to go through the 7 day period with sprinkling of the ashes of the paraduma. He can have a much simpler mikvah experience, and then he becomes tahor at the evening. The asu inhu, that's where the Rabbanan came along. They said, you know what? We don't want people to make the confusion and not realize when they are really tummy for 7 days. They think, well, I didn't touch the body myself. I touched the person who's touching the person. Therefore, I'm only tummy for 1 day. Well, that's true if the person you were touching was not still touching the body, but if the person you were touching was still touching the body, you are tummy for 7 days. Therefore, the Rabbanan came along, Vigozer, and they made the enactment, Afilu shelo bechiburin tumas shiva. They said, you know what? Even if you were in contact with a person who touched a body and he's not in contact anymore, you're going to still have to keep 7 days. Ve'asaihu, and that's where the basin of Rabbi Yosef came along, ve'okma ad de'oraisa, and they said, leniency, we go back to the Torah rule, only 1 day. De'oraisa mai, what is the Torah rule? Dichsiv, the pasuk says, hanogea b'meis l'chol nefesh adam v'tamei shivas yamim, right? It says the person who touches the body is tamei for 7 days. Uksiv, then the pasuk says, v'chol asher yiga bo hatamei yitma. Then the second pasuk says anybody who touches him becomes tamei as well. That pasuk is continuing on in the same type of tuma as the person who we were just talking about. So the person who touches the person who's tamei also stays tamei for 7 days. Uksiv. Then the next pasuk says v'nefesh hanogas titma ad ha'arav. Then somebody who touches becomes tamei till the evening. So Kate said, how could you be both? The person who touches gets tamei for 7 days, and the person who touches is tamei for 1 day. Which is it? Kan bechiburin, kan shelo bechiburin. It depends if you were touching the body at the time, the person who was touching the body at the time or not. If he was touching the body at the time, the tumah transfers for 7 days. If not, it's only for 1 day. Yeah, Brian.
Okay, so I have a question. So does that mean like the red heifer? Where does that fit into this? Because if you're only telling me for 7 days, what do? You go to the mikvah and then you're tahor, and that's it?
Only if that's the evening. If it's the 7 days, then on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, you're being sprinkled with the ashes of the paraduma.
Without it, are you tahor? Could you become tahor? No. Okay,
Correct.
so when they say up to 7 days, that's
That's the 7 days is the code for the Para Aduma experience.
right.
I
Okay.
was not sure whether when they said 7 days midrabanan, whether they were basically requiring you to go get the paraduma, which I think that they are, right? In other words, that they're because we always have the rule of derabanan ke'ein deoraisa, that whenever they make a rabbinic enactment, they're doing it so that it should be equivalent to the way the Torah rules are. So therefore, it would seem that even the rabbinic tuma that they enacted also required a paraduma.
Okay.
That's
But
essentially
Deraisa, a Rishon would like Deraisa means the majority of people are not tummy. Is that correct?
That is correct, right? In other words,
Right.
meaning that if you are somebody who yourself didn't go to a funeral, right? If you went to a funeral, then you're in the same building, whatever, you become an avatuma, right?
Okay.
Just saying. But if you are somebody who has never gone to a funeral before, and there's no way to get rid of that, right? But if you
Right.
are somebody who's never done that and you've just simply touched somebody else who is tameh, become a rishon l'tuma, and then then it's only you can go to the mikvah, right? And that will be that. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam she'akol nivro. Okay, so now, Amar lehu Rava. Rava said about that. Lav amina lehu lo titlu be boki sariki berav Nachman. Didn't I tell you you're not supposed to hang? I think it's threads of nothingness, right? You can't hang that on Rav Nachman, right? This is not. It's false. What you just suggested that Rav Nachman enacted is not true. Kadim raking is empty jugs. That's what it is, empty jugs, right? Don't hang empty jugs. I mean, that's nothing. Hachiyam Rav Nachman. This is what Rav Nachman really said. Suffolk Tuma, this was the enactment that had nothing to what you just said. That's not true. Rather, the enactment is like this. Suffolk Tuma Berushus Harabim Hitir Lahen. The permissibility was that if somebody becomes Tameh in a doubtful way in a public place, so he said that's permissible, right? That's where you're not tame. Meaning, if there's a corpse somewhere in a public domain and you're not sure if you came in contact with it, you can rely on the fact that you did not. Where do we know that? Because we learned this. We're going to say "V'ha hilchasa misota gamrinan law." He says, but that we don't need Rav Nachman to permit that. That is a halacha that we learned from the rules of sota. Mas sota rishusa yachid. The story of the sota is that she goes into a private place, and the Torah uses a strange language. The Torah uses the language of that she was impure. Now she wasn't impure, right? She didn't do anything. She did an act. One could talk and use the euphemism of impure. She was immodest. But impure isn't quite the right word. The Torah says from the fact that the word impure is used, it is used to indicate that impurity is only, this is a case of sota, when she goes into private, then you have to presume the worst, and therefore you have to have her checked. But in public, if somebody is in a doubt about tuma, in public, you can be lenient. So if you're in a situation of doubtful tuma, this has nothing to do with what the sota did, but we're going to use the word tuma. If there's a doubtful circumstance of tuma in a private location, then it's still tame, and then you're still tame. But if you're in a doubtful situation in a public place, you're not tame. Okay, that we learned from sota. So that's what we say. Masota rishusa yachid, aftuma rishusa yachid. Just like a sota is done in private, so too tuma in private transfers in a suffix situation. So ha amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said about that halacha ve'ein morin kain. That is indeed the halacha, but we don't want people to become lenient in that regard. We don't tell people that. Why? Because if you told people, well, it's a public place, you can be lenient, then people would be in a situation, they're in their backyard, that's kind of public, that's public enough. It's doubtful, right? They wouldn't take it seriously. They'd stop taking the doubt of Tuma seriously, knowing that in some circumstances a doubt is permissible, then that means that doubts are not so serious. Why would I have to take a doubt stringently when it's in private and people will make the wrong halacha? Therefore, although that's really the halacha, we don't tell people that. We just tell people, be strict. Why? Because what's the worst thing that can happen? Go to the mikvah? Okay, go to the mikvah extra. So the guy go to the mikvah extra one time. That's better off than the guy not going to the mikvah when he should have. Okay? V'asa ihu v'orule. And that's what Rav Yosef did. Rav Yosef said that I'm going to tell everybody that halacha. That was his leniency. The leniency that he had was to tell people that the halacha was you can be lenient in these circumstances. The orile aruye. Tanya Nam Yoch. We have a brisa that supports that scenario, that explanation of what Rav Yosef did. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, Koros Notz Lahem. He made established what Rabbi Yosef did was he set up he put posts into the ground. The Omer, and he said Ad Kan Rishus Rabim, Ad Kan Rishus Yachid. He made it very clear. This side of the post is public. This side of the fence post is private. Now that there's no questions what's private and what's public, now you can be lenient on this side of the post. You can be strict on this side of the post. Right? That eliminates the problem, and therefore, by doing so, he started to be able to teach it. So, ki also lekame to Rabbi Yanai, when a story came up like this, where somebody had a suffix tuma, it came to Rabbi Yanai, Amar luhu hamaya beshik asa benahara zilu tvulu, that he said to him, "What? There's no more water in the river? Go jump in the mikvah. What's the big deal, right? In other words, what's the reason to be lenient at the end of the day? Just go jump in the mikvah if you can." Now, if where's the circumstance that you could be lenient, right? If you have food, you can't take your food and dunk it in the mikvah. So therefore, if you've got food that's tamei, that's as a result of this sort of a circumstance, so then there could be a reason why you would be lenient. But if a person shows up and says, "Hey, I became tamei in a public place in my," the answer is go to the mikvah. What's the big deal? It doesn't hurt, right? Now the admission fee is affordable, so just go. So, okay, we are at, as Jeff comes in right at the perfect time, 2 dots on Lamed Zayin Amud Beis. We are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines from the bottom. I don't know what is it in art school, 37B, probably 3? 4. 37B4, Jeff. That's where we are in the art school. Okay? So now, Veha Shlokos, the next thing that in the Mishnah, that we're back to the Mishnah's items, the things that you cannot use from a non-Jew. Shlokos are things that are cooked by non-Jews. This is Yehuda's big issue, right? That bishul akum. Up until this point, we discussed pas yisrael, which was bread baked by Jews, and we had talked about leniencies and the amount of, but this is a different story. This is actually food that gets cooked by non-Jews. Minan immediately, what is the source for this prohibition, and what's the concern with it? Amar Chia Barabba says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Amar, the pasuk says, Ochel bekasef tashbireni ve'achalta umayim bekasef titenli v'shasisi. With food, with money, you will feed me, and I will eat, and water with money I will buy, and I will drink. This is when Bnei Israel a couple of parashas ago came by Midian, and they wanted to pass through, and they said, is it Moab? Midian? What was Moab? Right? They came by. I'm confused about which one of my nations. Yeah. They came by and they said, we want to be able to pass by, and we'd like to buy some food and water from you. We're willing to buy it. Okay? And so it says, we want to buy some food from you. We'd like to buy some water from you. So now, says the Gemara, Ma mayim shelo nishtanu. So what they were hinting is water. We want to buy water. Water has not changed from its original form. That we can buy from a non-Jew. Af ochel shelo nishtanu. Also, the food that we would buy has to be food that has not been processed in any way by non-Jews. If it had been processed by non-Jews, we would not be allowed to eat it. Therefore, that's what we would buy. Elameata. Well, if that's true, then chitin v'asan kloyos hachinami da'asurin. Let's say you have parched flour. I'm not exactly sure how you parch flour. I think that you toast it in order to remove the liquid from it, right? And so therefore, that is a change in status. So why should be that if you have a parched flour, that should be not allowed to be eaten if it comes from a non-Jew. And before you answer, you're right. That's a great point. If you've got wheat and you've made it into parched flour, mutarin, they are permissible. So ella kamayim. So rather, it's not that you can't have it processed in any way. It's that it has to be like water. Ma mayim shelo nishtanu mibriya son. Just like water hasn't changed from its original form. Af ochel shelo nishtanu mibriya. So you also cannot have food that's been changed from its original form. Ela me'ata, well, if that's true, then chitin v'tachnon hachinami dasurin. Let's say a non-Jew took wheat kernels and he ground them up and he made flour. So you should not be allowed to have flour that's ground by a non-Jew. And we know that Yehuda does not go to the flour plants and turn on the grinder. So therefore, v'chitema hachinami, before you tell me that it is prohibited, v'hatani, we learn in a brisa, chitin v'asan kloyos, v'hakmachin v'asalto shalahem mutarid. Not only is parched grain okay, but so is ground up wheat also okay. Ella, so rather we have to fine tune this halacha. Kamayim, it has to be like water. Mamayim shulu nishanu mibrias neyadea. Or it has to be a food that hasn't changed its form by fire, by cooking. Yes, Dad.
It says right in the article, it's the Amorites.
Sorry?
It's the Amorites.
Oh, the Amorim. Thank you. It was the Amorim that they said those. I remember they were passing by. I didn't think it was Moab. Moab gets destroyed, but Sichon and Og got destroyed a couple weeks ago. And then this past week's parsha we destroyed the Moavim and Bilam and Balak get killed in this week's parsha. So it had to be somebody else's. The Amorim. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for checking back. So af ochel shul nishtan b'berso ayidei ha'or. Therefore, as Yehuda will tell you, the only food you have to worry about non-Jews working with is food that will change by being cooked. Yeah, Brian.
So why are we allowed, based on that, you have to cook it? Why are we allowed popcorn made by like it's not considered bishul aku?
It seems from where we are that it should be.
Yeah. Okay.
So let's see where that would seem that yes, I would say that is a significant enough of a change, right? So I'm not the COR Yehuda. Yes, he is.
But what did you think? What did you think that in the facility, the faculties, they have a mashgiach there to turn on the equipment and whatever?
Yes, but you're a page ahead of us, Yehuda. Hang on, we haven't gotten there. You already know what to do, right? But at this point, the halacha is.
Yeah, but they don't do that with popcorn. You can go buy popcorn from somebody who's turned on the machine. There's no.
That is, yeah, I've seen it, right? You go, there are places where they have a hechsher and they have the popcorn and they're making the popcorn there. Fair question. So, well, I'm gonna try to take a look. Maybe that's gonna be my homework for posting on the WhatsApp group about popcorn. Whether that's maybe that's what we mean by parched. Well, there's a potential answer. You'll see when we get to the end of the Gemara if you can answer it yourself, because I'm thinking of something, but I would like to know if you think of the same thing that I say.
Okay.
But no, I'm not. I'm disagreeing with myself. It's not possible. Okay, I'll have to think of a better answer. Okay, now, midei or ksiv. It doesn't say in the pasuk that you need a fire. Ella midirabanan. Rather, this whole rule about bishul akum is rabbinic. Right? The source from it is completely derabanan. Vikra asmachta biyama. And the pasuk is only to help remember is only to remember it. It has not, the pasuk is not a real drush because it doesn't say the fire in it anywhere. But this is a halacha derabanan. All enacted because chasnus. We're not supposed to get too close with the non-Jews, so we don't want to get invited over for lunch with them. And therefore, since we don't want to be invited over for lunch, we don't eat anything cooked by a non-Jew. Now, Amar Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak says, Amar Rav, in the name of Rav, Kol anechel kemos shehu chai, ein bo mishum bishul yovdei kochavim. Anything that can be eaten raw by itself doesn't need to worry about bishul akum if they cook it, right? If you get a carrot and then they cook a carrot, you can eat that carrot because you could have eaten it raw. So therefore, that's not a bishul akum situation. Besura masnu hachi. That's how they taught it in Surah. But Pumbedisa Masnuchi, this is how they taught it in Pumbedisa, that Amar Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak Amar Rav, that Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak says in the name of Rav, Kol she'enu necha al shulchan melachim lelafis boas apas, anything that is not eaten on the table of kings, meaning it has to be a significant enough dish, right? It's not this, remember the idea of kasnus, right? It has to build a connection. If it's a simple nothing, right, a potato, so then that's not going to be meaningful. Right? It has to be something which is a significant enough dish. Then if it's not, it's not a problem of bishul akum. My beinayhu.
And then could this be maybe a possible reason why popcorn would be allowed?
Whether that would be the difference in popcorn. It's a fair, we can start thinking about it. But my beinayu, what is the practical difference between the two? Ika beinayu, dogim kitanim, va'ardi v'daiso. If you've got these small little fish, and you've got ardi and daiso, which are types of porridges, I believe. Pitriots are they mushrooms, right? And then some kind of like a farina or a wheat kind of a oatmeal kind of a thing, right? So those sorts of things, they can't be eaten raw, right? So therefore, it should be a bishul akum issue. But on the other hand, they're not really king food, and therefore they shouldn't be a problem of bishul akum. So in practice, halachically, that's the problem with the answer that you gave, is that that generally speaking, we're machmir like the both, right? We are avoiding. We kind of need avoid bishul akum with any of those kinds of things. Here's right. Jeff's got his oatmeal, right? Not a bishul akum problem, right? He poured his own water. Yehuda.
Also, but usually corn is okay to eat when it's raw, right? You don't have to cook it. But
Which one?
But when the corn on its own, right? But
So
when you
that's
make
what I was
popcorn, you use
thinking.
those
That's what I was
dry corn-
thinking
you use
first.
dry-
But you can't really eat raw corn. You have to cook raw corn. You have to cook corn. You can't eat.
Right.
You can't eat. You can, if you go to the store and you get corn on the cob, it's not edible. That was my first thought is, oh well, you eat corn and then you pop. Not really actually. Kernel.
How much more? How much more so when you dry the corn on its own, then you make popcorn. That's another issue on its own.
So that could be the issue. If they made the corn, if the first part of the process of making popcorn is that a Jew is involved in the process where they dry the kernels, that's the thought, but I'd have to look up exactly how popcorn is made, whether that is done or whether that is not done. So that's my thought. Yeah, Brian.
Fish today, salmon and tuna, we eat it raw. I wonder if does that take away the chashash of bishul akum, since we
It may.
would eat it raw?
It may. And not only would I say that is the case, if you had asked the question 30 or 40 years ago before anybody in Canada and the US ate sushi, the answer might have been a different way. Right? Because we're gonna see we're jumping ahead to the end of the Gemara, but we're gonna see that if you have a food that some people eat raw and some people will eat cooked, but most people eat it only cooked, then you can't be lenient. But now that you're in a situation where it's common for the sushi to be eaten raw, right? Now I suppose it would have to be sushi quality, right? I'm not quite sure. And I know that I don't know that you could just go to the store and get a fillet of salmon and slice that on your sushi, right? I guess people could, right? But I think that there's like higher quality salmon. I don't know. I'm not sure. But I'm just saying that it seems to me that your point is valid. Yes, since most people now will eat the salmon or tuna raw, then it seems like it could be then not a bishul akum problem if it gets cooked. But you'd have to ask your rabbi there. Amar Rav Asi, Amar Rav Asi and Rav, Dogim Ktanim Meluchim. If you've got small salted fish, Ein Behem Mishum Bishuli Ovdei Kochavim, that you don't have to worry about bishul akum for, because it's salted, it's not cooked. And we said it has to be through fire. Salting is not, even though right, they pickle it, right? So if you have a non-Jew pickle herring, that's not a problem. It's not cooked, it's pickled, that's not a problem. Amar of Yosef, Rav Yosef says, Im tzol on ovdei kochavim somech Yisrael alehem mishum eruve tafshilin, that if a non-Jew now he takes the pickled fish and he roasts it, a Jewish person can take it and use it for his eruv tafshilin. Now let's figure this out, right? An eruv tafshilin is when Yom Tov falls out on Friday, and so therefore, from the Torah's perspective, you're allowed to cook on Yom Tov, but you're not allowed to cook on Yom Tov for after Yom Tov generally, because you're not allowed to cook for a holy day and then have the leftovers you have to be able to use it for benefit. The thing is that Shabbos is a holier status. So you can cook on Yom Tov in order to prepare for Shabbos. But the Rabbanan made an enactment and they said, don't cook on Yom Tov or after Yom Tov ever, because we're concerned that you'll cook on Yom Tov or after Yom Tov in another circumstance where it's not allowed. But they said, if you will make a recognition of the fact that you're only allowed under these specific circumstances, we call it an Erev Tavshilin, begin your preparations for Shabbos before Yom Tov. You can continue your preparations on Yom Tov for Shabbos. So what we do is on a Friday, we'll use in Chutz La'aretz and outside of Israel, if Yom Tov falls out on Thursday, Friday, or on Friday, Shabbos, then before Yom Tov comes in, we take two cooked foods and we set them aside and we say, these are our two cooked foods. It's the beginning of our preparation for Shabbos. And now, come Friday, we will continue on Yom Tov to cook for Shabbos, and that won't be a prohibition because I've already started it. Here's our thing. Sorry?
Usually it would be like a challah and an egg.
Challah and egg or a matzah and an egg are commonly used because they don't go bad, right? You want food that's not going to go bad. So in the days before refrigeration, it became common to take matzah and an egg, or matzah maybe because of Yantif, because people then have no differentiation on Pesach, right? So those are things that don't go bad, but it can be, if I'm making my chicken for Shabbos, I could take a piece of chicken that I made and put it in the fridge, and I could use that. It just has to be two cooked foods. It doesn't have to be. It's commonly an egg and matzah because that's a nice non-refrigerable, non-perishable item that I can cook, but it could be any cooked food. Now, this non-Jew cooks this fish for a Jew. It's not a problem of Bishul Akum because the fish could have been eaten before it was cooked. But it is considered a cooked food that we can use for our Erev Tavshilin because it goes into a loophole that from one perspective, it's not a cooked food, and from the other perspective, it is a cooked food. That's why the Gemara brings us an interesting, kind of a riddle situation. How can you have a food that a non-Jew cooks, and then we consider it a cooked food, but nevertheless doesn't become prohibited as a cooked food? And so that's where we have this pickled fish. It is also a great trivia question, one of my favorite trivia questions of all time. Stump the kids, ask your kids. What bracha do we only make on Wednesdays or Thursdays? Right? That's our Erev Tavshilin bracha. We can only make that bracha only on Wednesdays and Thursdays, never any other time. You tell your kid if they get that, then they can get an ice cream or something and it'll drive them crazy. But okay. V'i avdinu ovdi kochavim kasa deharsana aser. So he says, now, however, if the non-Jew, right, he makes this fish into a dish called kasa deharsana. Right, what he does is he puts them in, they basically makes like a schnitzel out of it. He puts oil on it and he puts some flour on it and he makes a breaded fish. That is no good. You can't do that. So that's pshita. I mean, so that's obvious. That's a fried fish. No, Ma'odatim, what would you have thought? Harsana ikr. I might have thought that the fish in the cooked fish that was permissible and that's the main item, and so therefore it's okay. Kamash malan. Kimcha ikr, therefore now this is telling me something new, which is very important, that the breading of the fish is the main thing now. And the breading of the fish, the flour and oil, couldn't be eaten unless it's cooked. And so therefore, that fish that has the breaded fish on the outside, you cannot use that if the non-Jew makes that. So if you took the salmon and you made just plain salmon out of it, that would be, it seems like, as Brian said, they could eat that raw, that's fine. But once I make breaded fish sticks out of it, now I can't, because the breaded fish sticks is the ikr. This also, by the way, has a practical ramification as to what bracha you make on fish sticks, right? If the breaded coating is the main thing, then you can't make a shahakol on breaded fish sticks. You have to make a mazonos on breaded fish sticks. And I remember telling that to somebody about schnitzel for breaded chicken, and they could not believe I was right, and they had to look it up. But it seems to me, and you could look it up, make sure that nobody has disagreed with me in the meantime. But breaded schnitzel or breaded fish sticks and things, from this Gemara, as it says, that the breading is the main thing, and therefore, since it's mazonos, so therefore that you have to make a mazonos on as well. Okay. Amar Rav Bruna. Amar Rav Bruna said Rav. Ove kocham shehitzis esaor ba'agam. Let's say you have a non-Jew, and he lights a forest on fire. They're clearing away a forest. He wants to be able to make farmland. So the quick way to clear a forest is to light a forest fire, right? And they would have a controlled burn, right? So they burn up everything that's there. Okay. Meanwhile, it toasts all the grasshoppers. Okay. So now, right? He lights a fire in the agam in the marsh. Kochakavim sheba agam asurim. All of the grasshoppers that get cooked in that fire are prohibited from use. Can't eat them. Now, grasshoppers, we presume they're kosher, right? We're trying to figure out what the problem with them is. So, hey, Chidami, what's the circumstance? Why are the grasshoppers that got toasted in this burn not kosher? If the answer is because now you got a little parched little black grasshopper, you don't know if it was a kosher grasshopper or a non-kosher grasshopper. So my area over kochavim, then why would it matter if the non-Jew? Why is the case a non-Jew lit the fire? A Jew would light the fire. You'd have little toasted grasshoppers. You couldn't eat them either. It has nothing to do with being a Jew or a non-Jew. Yeah, Jeff, I can see you're going to be bothered by eating grasshoppers. Yeah.
Are you telling me that if I take a grasshopper and fry it, it's kosher?
The answer is it depends on the grasshopper. So I would tell you don't do it because I could not tell you which grasshopper, but maybe they always say, I'm going to apologize, Aaron, they always say the Sephardim know which grasshoppers. I met one time a Persian Sephardi who said, yes, we ate grasshoppers when I was growing up. Right, but that don't presume that if you get invited over to Aaron Kaslasi's house that he's got the grasshoppers at the kiddush. It's not accurate.
No,
All right, I won't eat grasshoppers.
So yes, avoid the grasshoppers.
you're gross.
It has not been my experience. Although Dad Shmuel Yitzchak said that yes, they used to eat grasshoppers,
Yes,
but
I know.
you're not surprised, right?
No.
So so Afilu Yisrael Nami, then even if a Jew would light the fire, they should be pretty because I wouldn't know which grasshoppers to have. Ella Mishum Bishuli of the Chavim must be because the non-Jew cooked the grasshoppers, right? And grasshoppers you couldn't eat raw. Jeff would never eat a raw grasshopper, so only if they're cooked up. Ki hai gavna mi asir. But then, if that's the case, if the non-Jew cooked the grasshoppers in this fashion, why would it be prohibited? In other words, the non-Jew is cooking the grasshopper, but he's not intending to cook. Remember that the rabbinic enactment is only because we don't want there to be some kind of, we don't want the non-Jew to cook for the Jew in order to be able to build a relationship. He lit a fire. Now there are cooked grasshoppers. Didn't do it for a Jew in order to build camaraderie here. So therefore, why it shouldn't be prohibited. V'amar Rav Chanan bar Ami, Amar Rav Padas Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Let's say there's a non-Jew and he's singeing the hair off of the head of an animal, right? The animal is dead, obviously. It's not. So now that he's got this animal, so they would. So wouldn't this be big? So this is Yehuda. This is what we're getting to, right? Why isn't it bishul akum? Because if a non-Jew is singeing the hair, this is what he's trying to do. He's trying to clear the head off of hair for whatever reason. I guess they're trying to get to whatever meat is left on the head of the animal. We avoid those things, but I guess when meat is scarce, right, you try to be able to get whatever you could. So shari lemecho mine afilu miresh one. You're allowed to eat any of the meat that gets cooked in that process of him burning off the hair, like even the ears, which are easily cooked because it's very thin. And so by the time he gets all the hair off, the ears are cooked. If a Jew wants to take those ears and snack, so then that's okay because it's not bishul akum. As Yehuda wants to know, why isn't it bishul akum? The answer is because it was cooked not intentionally for the sake of cooking. His fire wasn't designed to cook. It cooked as a side issue. Yeah, Jeff.
What's bishulako?
Cooking done by a non-Jew, right?
Thank you.
When a non-Jew cooks, that's our prohibition. Alma leovre sha'ar kamikavein. Right? This situation is all he wanted to do was create a flat field. He was just trying to set up his field. I'm sorry, avure shari. All he was trying to do was get the hair off. Hachanami here also legluye agma kamikavein. His intention wasn't to cook grasshoppers. His intention was to clear the field. So therefore, it shouldn't be an issue. So liolam, so rather the problem isn't bishul akum here. The problem isn't that the non-Jew cooked the grasshoppers. Lo yoda haytahor v'haytamei. We're back to the original problem. When we get a little toasted grasshopper that we find now, we don't know if it was a kosher grasshopper or a non-kosher grasshopper. One of, I think, probably the reason why we couldn't tell is we'd have to be able to see what kind of antenna it has or what kind of wings it has, and I don't know that those things survive the cooking process. So it would be difficult for us to be able to tell what kind of a grasshopper it was. The answer, so it shouldn't matter whether the person who cleared the field or not was Jewish or not. The issue is here that in this circumstance, the person who did it happened. It really happened. The story really happened, and it was done by a non-Jew. So therefore, it didn't really matter. That wasn't relevant to the story. It just happened to be true. That was the true story. The non-Jew did it. Okay, Gufa. Let's go back on this issue. Amar Rabbi Rechana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. We changed that too. We changed the gears to two. Amar Rav Chanan Bar Ami, Amar Rav Padas, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Hi ove kochav dechorich reisha shari lemecha minei afilu mireish onei. If the non-Jew is cooking by accident, really, right? He's trying to remove the hair from the head of this animal and he toasts the ears of the animals. The toasted ears are acceptable to eat. Amar Ravina says Hilkach. Therefore, Hai ove kochavim deshada sichta la'asuna v'kavar ba Yisrael kra me'ikara shapir dami. He says, therefore, that puts a pillar of wood into a fire, right? What he does is he's got a peg and he wants to be able to remove the moisture from this peg to make it ready for use, to make it good for his whatever he needs this peg for. And he needs the oven. So he puts this he lights the oven fire and he puts this in there. Now, what he did not know is that the Jew had put some food in there beforehand, right? And now that the non-Jew lights the fire, the food in the oven cooks. That's not bishul akum because the non-Jew didn't intend to cook the food, right? He intended to fix his utensil. So pshita, so now it's obvious. You already told me this halacha. Now that I know the halacha that if the non-Jew cooks unintentionally, it doesn't count as bishul akum, I get it. No. Ma'odetema, what would you have thought? Levishuli mona kamechavin. The non-Jew did intend to cook. Now, if the non-Jew had intended to cook one food and instead he cooked two foods, that we would say is prohibited because he did intend to cook. So now that he's intending to cook this utensil, so you might presume that it is prohibited. Kamash malon, l'shure mona kamechave, that no, this is only to make the utensil better. He's only working to fix his utensil. He didn't intend to cook. Now, the Tosfos points out that, again, this is another one of those interesting circumstances. From the perspective of Hilchos Shabbos, if one fires up an oven and hardens a utensil, that is a prohibition of bishul. It violates the Shabbos prohibition. I'm going to say it would be Misaki Mana, could be potentially a last action in order to make it usable. But even if, let's say it still needs to be quenched or something like that needs to happen before the utensil is usable, the utensil being put into the fire is in itself cooking. And so therefore we have another one of these circumstances where in one area of halacha, what the non-Jew is doing is called cooking, but in a different area of halacha, it is not considered cooking. So from the perspective of Shabbos, if a Jew would do this on Shabbos, it would be cooking. But if a non-Jew does this, it's not cooking and the food is permissible. Okay, so now we've got to get into Yehuda's job here. We're going to get to how do we solve this problem. Amar of Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Hiniach Yisrael Basar Gabi Gecholin. Let's say a Jew puts the food onto the fire. Now a non-Jew comes over later and he turns it over, he flips it. So let's say Yehuda comes on the job and he lights the pilot light. He lights the fire in the oven. And now the non-Jew comes along later and he flips the burgers. That is mutter. That's fine, right? Hey chidami. So what's the story here? If you're going to tell me that the meat was already on the fire, and if the non-Jew didn't come along and flip it, it would have cooked anyway. So pshita, so that's obvious. The Jew did the cooking in the first place. So then the fact that the non-Jew flipped it was irrelevant. So isn't it that if the non-Jew wouldn't have flipped it, it wouldn't have cooked? So if that's the case, on my mutter, why should that be allowed? Bishul Yov de Kochavim Ninhu. That is cooking from the non-Jew. So the answer is lo tzricha. No, I do need it. The ilo hafach hava bashal b'tarti shoy. The circumstance is that if you wouldn't have flipped it, then it would have taken 2 hours to cook. V'hashta kabashal b'chad shata, and now it's going to cook more quickly. Ma'odatema. What would I have thought? Keruve bishula milsahi. That making the cook faster is considered a significant step, and the non-Jew shouldn't do that. Kamash malon. That no. Yeah, Yehuda.
And some people are very machmir when it comes to having a yid cook the food all together, like flipping it and everything as well.
Sorry?
Yeah, some people are so machmir that they want the yid to flip the food and cook it fully for them.
So there you go. We have even extra chumras from the COR. Yehuda, they keep Yehuda busy, right? Try to be able to keep Yehuda for this, as you see this Gemara, as we'll try to remove the non-Jew from the process as much as possible. There was a group of robbers called Ben Drusoi. And the thing with robbers is they have to stay on the move. So what they would do is they would steal their food and they would cook it 1/3 of the way and they would eat it 1/3 of the way cooked. So that was called Kemachal Ben Drusoi, is the nickname for food that is barely edible, like rare, right? I think that's what we call it, right? Rare. I guess it's like very, very the least amount of cooked. We call it Kamachal Ben Drusai. So yes. Okay, no, I thought you were saying. Okay, and Rav Asi said in Rabbi Yochanan, anything which is Kamachal Ben Drusai, ain't bo bishum bishuli ovdei kochavim. Once you get to that level, then it's already cooked, right? So then that's the issue potentially we had wanted to suggest with the popcorn, right? Maybe the Jew already prepares the beginning stages of it, but it's not edible still, so we're not exactly sure about that. So then that means that even if Yehuda lights the fire, if the food that gets put on the fire is not edible, so then it shouldn't be permissible. So the answer is no. Hasam can go into osve besilta v'shakle ovdei kochavim v'osve betanura. So he says that prohibition is when the food is sitting in the fridge, and then it's not going to cook if the non-Jew doesn't do something with it. Then that's a problem. But if it's on the fire and it's going to cook and the non-Jew is just making you cook faster, even if it's less than 1/3 of the way cooked, that is permissible. Okay, so that's the distinction. Tanya, I think my father's raising his hand.
Yes. Yeah. Practically, isn't it enough for the Mashiach to set the fire, turn the fire on?
Yeah. So when we get to the end of the Gemara, we will see that practically speaking, it seems like getting involved at any of the stages of the process should be acceptable.
If you light that's why if the pot already lit, the non-Jews are allowed to turn it off. If it doesn't flame, that's when you relight the stove or whatever.
Because the pilot light already lights the other fires. So you're using the Jew. I walked into Bali Lafa as a customer, right? And the guy turns to me. I guess I look Jewish, right? So he says to me, "Could I borrow you for a second? Could you light the pilot light?" So he brought me back into the kitchen, and I lit the pilot light in Bali Lafa. When I walked in, they didn't even give me a discount. Anyway,
as long as you have a flame, as long as you have a flame underneath, and the non-Jew turns up the stove or element, so it's okay because the pilot's already lit.
Exactly. Yeah, Jeff.
Just Rabbi Loiterman, we're thinking that it might be a good idea to pause a little bit early so that folks can get to shul.
Oh, smart. So let us. Okay, good. Thank you for letting me know. Let us at least get. We'll see if we turn the page or not. But maybe.
Okay.
Let me finish right to an issue.
Okay.
We can stop and then we'll stop.
Thanks, Rabbi.
The Bryce like this as well. If a Jew puts the meat onto the fire, and the non-Jew turns it over, meanwhile the Jew is at shul. This is this issue that we're dealing with, right? So you want your breakfast to be cooked, so you put your food onto the barbecue before you leave to shul, and then you tell your non-Jewish maid, could you just keep an eye on this and flip the burgers and make sure everything is good? Omi based on medrash, or you're going to come back from learning. You don't have to worry about that. Shofetas isha kedera gabe kira, a woman could put her pot on the fire. Ubaso vedes kochavim, and comes a non-Jewish lady, and the maid is going to continue working on it. Umagisa tavo bibeis hamerchatz, and now she says, keep stirring this while I go take a shower. Omi beis hakneses, or I'll come back from shul. Ve'eno chosheshes, and then you don't have to worry about it. That's a good place for us to stop right there. And that's our rule, right? Once the Jewish person starts it, so then he can leave it and let his non-Jewish assistant or waiter or whatever finish it up and take care of it. We will finish up the halachos of Bishul Akum tomorrow.
Beautiful.
We're moving a little slow through this. I'm comfortable doing only because it's so practical.
Yeah, absolutely.
And interesting to do. So and there's also a couple of long pages coming up. So we'll probably do one page a day for.
Sounds great.
Plus, we're gonna figure out the schedule for Tisha B'av as well with the Daf Yomi.
That's correct. We do have to figure out Tisha B'av.
Correct.
Correct. Probably we're not, but we'll have to catch up, right?
Yeah.
Okay. As our custom.
No
All
problem.
Right, everyone, have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
Shavua Tov, everybody.
Take care, guys.